What up, guys and girls? It's Bobby.
And Sean, happy Easter.
Happy Easter, everybody. For those of you that believe in Christianity and the Judeo-Christian values or religions, I guess, happy Easter. Happy Passover for those Jews. And I think that's it for the religious holidays in this time
And for
period.
those of you that just want an excuse to eat chocolate.
Oh, dude. I ate an entire bag of Reese's eggs the other day. It was like last week. It was delicious. But now I feel like I'm like a huge fat piece of shit after this week.
Oh, that's not preferable to go through that many eggs in one sitting.
Well, I will say it was like a period of like a week, so it wasn't like I just sat there on the couch going through an entire bag of Reese's eggs. So it was like maybe like 3 or 4 a day for like a week straight.
That's better. Dan and I had that problem. Whenever I go shopping, this is when we're in the city, my roommate Dan,
Mm-hmm.
like you can tell who does the weekly shopping because I'll be like, I'm not buying anything. If I buy sweets, I know I'm gonna find myself at the end of the night being like, I can have one.
Yeah.
If I can have one, I can have two. And then like a week later, Dan's like, dude, I didn't touch the chocolate. I'm just like, shit, that was all me. Bad,
Oh,
Sean. Very bad.
dude, I'm the same way. Like when I go shopping with or go shopping with Christina, like I have to watch what I pick up because I know that if I get like candy or sweets, it's gonna be me that eats it all. So like I always buy it for the two of us, but then
Yeah.
it ends up being me eating all of it. Which
Oh, and
so now I'm just trying to like
it's awful. Thin Mints. Like Girl Scout season, I hate Girl Scouts. I don't like you're gonna stand out there, you're gonna sell these awesome cookies. It's nothing to do with your salesmanship. It's just strictly the taste that I'm after. And Dan, again, like I don't know where you pick this stuff up in New York City, but Dan will always come back and be like, "Oh, I got Girl Scout cookies, the Samoas, the Thin Mints,
mm,
like even the shittier lemon things. I'll go through the entire box in one sitting, and then I'm just like, Dan, like don't do this to me, man. Like he's like, oh, I put them in the freezer. It's like, oh, they're so much better now. Like stop this. Like this is really frustrating because
dude,
I
it's,
eat
it's
it all.
always
I've got
I
a
like.
awful impulse control.
Oh yeah, no, I'm the same way. It's like I feel because I always feel bad when like Girl Scout cookies or Girl Scouts are like, "Hey, sir, you gonna buy some cookies? You want to buy some Girl Scout cookies?" I'm like, "Oh, I really, I really shouldn't, but your product is too good." And then
It,
they always sell them at my train station, so when I come home from school, they're sitting at like inside the train station selling them. So it's like you have to like stop and buy them. Like you can't
yeah,
not buy them.
yeah, and it's no longer, oh, sorry, ladies, I don't have cash on me. It's like, well, I've got this little chip that plugs into the bottom of my iPhone, and you can just swipe away. Or, Apple Pay me. It's like, God, we are making
I know.
making
I
this
was
really difficult.
I was bitching about they had this one Girl Scout troop there that were selling cookies, and then they didn't accept Venmo or didn't have any like Cash App or any of those like digital money transfer devices, and I was like, come on, man! Like if you really wanted my business, you would have accepted this Venmo. But now, because I don't have cash, I can't give you cash.
It's the easy way. I'm always like hesitant though of people like, selling stuff and their wares on the side of the road. Like Girl Scouts are one of the things I probably have more faith towards. I think if at any point you wear a vest, I'm just naturally going to trust you. Home Depot,
Hmm.
Lowe's, Girl Scouts, like that's probably it. I don't know who else wears a vest that I would trust.
Boy Scouts?
No. Absolutely not. I went to a Boy Scout meeting when I lived in Germany. My parents were stationed at Grafenwehr, and we had like family friends that had like a Boy Scout troop, whatever they call themselves, that they were attached to. And I remember my dad being like, "All right, like we'll go check it out." And I remember standing around with these like young Boy Scouts that were my age, and they're teaching a lot of like survival stuff, but I remember just going, my dad can teach me all this as it is. Like, I don't need some stranger's father to teach me how to tie a bowline. I don't need some stranger to, you know, instill in me those virtues of helping the elderly cross the street. I was like, this just seems like a thing for kids that don't have like a strong, I'm not saying like a strong father figure, but a
Hmm.
father that has any sort of those skills already developed. Like, I feel like a lot of what the Boy Scouts are developing are things that your dad should probably be able to teach you. And anything more than that, just go into the military. I mean, why go halfway? You 12-year-old punk. Just why
Yeah.
don't you do the real thing?
Just
Yeah,
enlist and
just
get the
enlist.
real thing.
Yeah, no, but I never did the Boy Scouts. I didn't like popcorn, and I attributed popcorn and like candied popcorn, which is like another discussion we can have. Just probably the most awful dessert of any dessert. Um,
Uh,
yeah, it was like, okay, Girl Scouts got cookies, Boy Scouts got shitty caramel popcorn. I'm
yeah,
not
shitty popcorn.
not into it. So because of that, I never. The Boy Scouts were never able to draft me. That's how I think it came down.
Yeah, I remember. I think had like a pretty similar experience in Cub Scouts. Like my parents signed me up for Cub Scouts when I was like 5 or 6, and I just remember going to like Cub Scout camp and just being like, "What the fuck is going on? Like, who are these people? Like,
All
why are
really
they?"
really unathletic kids though. Like it's not like you found the Boy Scouts were the same kids you were playing baseball, football, hockey, and soccer with. They were like the weird kids that got into like what is it, whittling? Is that what we play with wood?
Mm-hmm.
Like at too young of an age, and we're like, I made a steak. You're like, okay, stay the fuck away from me. And then like later, as you get into high school, those kids that didn't get out of Boy Scouts, either one ended up at West Point, or two were like bragging about how many badges they had on their vest and that, or no, they had the sash. Boy Scouts had the sash.
No, Girl Scouts have the stash.
No, the Boy Scouts had that big like red sash, like a South American dictator with all of their like, like I bagged groceries and I tied a knot and I started a fire
I thought that
in
was
your
the
neighbor's
vest.
house. No, I think the Girl Scouts put theirs on a vest. The Boy Scouts put it on a sash.
You sure?
Again, I'm not a subject matter expert, Bobby. I went to one Boy Scout meeting. You apparently were a Cub Scout
That's true.
and
I
a
was
West
so
Pointer.
sad.
I just think that I'm okay. Here's another thing. How many of your classmates at West Point do you think were like Eagle Scouts?
10%, easy.
10% easy. Look at that.
Easily 10%. If I think the statistic might actually be higher of like Eagle Scouts like West Point. I'm actually kind of curious now. Let's see. Let's see. Eagle Scout West Point. But like the Boy Scouts, I guess like love West Pointers. Oh, in
It goes back to a
2000.
like a service type thing.
So hold on. In 2017, they had 239 Eagle Scouts, which was 20% of the class was Eagle Scouts.
Jesus.
And that's comparable to Navy has 109 Eagle Scouts, which is 11.9%. And the Air Force Academy
Okay.
has 425 Eagle Scouts, which is 10%.
Wow. Wow. So Air Force has more, but has a lower per capita.
I think they just, depending on how they do the statistics, I think for Air Force, it was the entire Air Force Academy, whereas for West Point, it was just for that one class.
Huh. That's pretty impressive. I mean, like it takes a long time to become an Eagle Scout, and like doing stuff that I've never had any interest in doing in my entire life. So like,
Yeah,
good
like,
on you if you got it, but mm-mm,
yeah,
nope.
like I see a lot of utility from it, and I think I can see like the skills that Boy Scouts slash Eagle Scouts will teach you, like perseverance, dedication, all the stuff that we talk about. So I think that there's probably some pretty good carryover or good like leadership skills or traits that you can pick up in Eagle Scouts that would transfer directly over. I think, but it doesn't excuse the fact that the majority of Boy Scouts that I knew were weird as shit, like you said.
Yeah, like and like even the ones that I know that joined the army subsequently, like you could usually spot, like especially like everyone knows that infantry officer that probably should not have gone infantry, but they thought it was the coolest, most hua thing to do. Like there was a guy I went to LDAC with, and we had like the rubber M60 because they can't give us like real machine guns, and
What?
yeah, and
We were
this guy
machine guns.
was that like he was crying carrying this on a ruck. It was like just a 10K
No.
ruck, and we are like, just give it to us. And then like he ended up being a Boy Scout, and it was just like, God, like there's too many, there's too much of an overlap between like the weirdos that I knew in school growing up,
Uh-huh.
and then like the infantry officers, and you're like, you just know when you look at somebody, you're like, Boy Scouts, yeah, I did. I didn't think of sport, but definitely Boy Scouts.
It's like Boy Scouts and homeschooling.
Oh yeah, those guys.
Like you
Yeah,
de- I remember like yeah, at West Point for sure, like meeting some people and be like, you're a little weird. You must have been either homeschooled or had some Boy Scouts or did something kind of weird. And that
yeah.
usually was pretty rare.
Class valedictorian. The only person you're competing against is your 12-year-old sister.
Yeah, definitely some weird people.
Yeah,
Uh,
those are probably the ones laughing right now, though, where they're like, "My kid's not getting corona. Like, I didn't send him to like public school with the rest of
it's
the
true.
filth."
It's very interesting. I always kind of wonder about, with my kids, how education is going to work out with them. That's something that's like always in the back of my mind. Because, like, thinking back and looking back on how I was raised and seeing, like, what my parents did or did not do to kind of raise me, it's always been kind of interesting kind of thinking about, like, how I can, reset the same condition or set the same conditions for my kids growing up, Because that's one thing I always wonder about, like how I'm gonna raise my kids.
Exactly. I think I will try to do the same thing my parents did. They never forced the military on me. In fact, it
Hmm.
was like I think quite the opposite after 9/11 and growing up in the DC area. But I always had like a very strong patriotic feel just growing up on military bases in Germany and in the States. So I don't know how I'll be able to replicate that
Hmm.
now being out of the military, but I still want the same thing, like hard work. I know for sure I'm not enrolling kids in private school. I think I was really well prepared for both military service and in general just being like a good dude by going to public schools and meeting kids from all different backgrounds, both like socioeconomically, and then because DC is like a huge melting pot, I think my middle school had like over 100 nations represented
Hmm.
alone, and then the high school was even more. So like learning about all of the individuals that were from the African continent, all parts of Asia, Europe, South America. I mean, it was like we're a great country because of all these people that come here and like just add a little bit to the national quilt. And so like that made me really proud to be an American and be able to represent that as a military officer and serve them was like a huge privilege. So I want that too for my kids. So wherever I live has to be like multicultural and it can't be just like this vanilla flavor bean because then I don't think the kids grow up with a really good appreciation for what America truly is.
Yeah, I was gonna say like I think both you and I have had kind of similar experiences growing up because we both grew up kind of on the East Coast. I mean, besides you with the growing up abroad with your dad in the army, but then once you guys like settled, you guys settled on the East Coast. So I definitely think there's a little bit of vibe that you get on the East Coast that you don't really get on kind of anywhere else. Because like
Right.
in the Northeast, you get like all like you said the multinational like all these immigrants as well. But then like in the rest of the country, it's kind of interesting too. Like I like to think about all the army traveling that we've done, living like across the country. Like for you, living in Texas, Georgia, and then Colorado, and then I did Washington State, Oklahoma, and then Georgia too. So it's like it's very interesting to me seeing how like different I guess areas regions operate. Because like, the
Yeah.
Northeast has such a different feel from it, from like the South, from Texas, from the Northwest. It's just interesting and seeing how where you're raised has such an impact on how you grow up too.
No, absolutely. And we've talked about it so many times with the general level of ignorance that some of our countrymen have towards immigrants and being serving more as an obstacle to bringing in someone and making them feel welcome. And growing up in DC, I think we had there were two national walkouts for individuals and then friends and families from South America and Central America because it was during the time I think when the whole Dreamers plan was being introduced. It was like the transitionary period between President Bush and President Obama, and then going through those steps to make these kids who didn't have an option whether or not they were going to come into this country legally or illegally, but giving them an opportunity to be Americans and making this pathway to citizenship. Like from a very young age, like I understood what was at risk for these individuals and why it was so important to them to be American. And there were so many kids, even in my high school, it wasn't like everyone was supportive, but we had a lot of individuals that were against the idea of a pathway to citizenship, just saying, no, you broke the law, you have to go back and come back. It's like, that's just so inefficient. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if these people want to come back and risk it all, like, that's, yeah, obviously they would do that time in and time out, but they're already here making the best of it. And their kids are now, at public schools, graduating as valedictorians, taking IB and AP. It's like, we're already better off because in 6 or 7 years when they enter the workforce, it's going to be fantastic because not only do you have someone that has like a different background, you're going to have someone that's going to be able to speak at least 2 languages, which is going to be better for business. Like at the end of the day, if you're trying to make money, if you have people that can communicate with other people that maybe don't have as proficient mastery of the English language, you're still going to get that business coming in. So it's just like, I don't know. I appreciate the struggles that people go through in order to get a better life here. And I was really happy again that I got to be raised around that environment and understand, what so many people did to become American.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely like a very sobering or kind of, just experience that a lot of people don't really appreciate growing up in America. Because I feel like, I guess you got the experience because you grew up kind of overseas, and then me, like my parents were immigrants, so I was a first generation American too. So I wonder like how much of that gets lost over the years and over the generations. Because like you think about every immigrant group in America has always faced like a great deal of prejudice going back to to Columbus and like the early settlers, through like the Italians, the Irish,
Asian
the
Americans over
Asian
on the West
Americans, yeah.
Coast helping build the Transcontinental Railroad.
Hmm. But it's
And
like,
there's a lot that immigrants have done for this country.
yeah, and that's the thing that I think that people forget is like, no one in America is really an American. It's only by you coming here, like your forefathers, your ancestors coming here, that makes you American. Like that's what makes you American, just being born in America. And then I think a lot
Yeah.
of people forget like the kind of the racism and prejudice that the early immigrants faced, like like the Irish in the 30s and 20s, and then the Italians in the 40s, and seeing how much like prejudice they face, and then you forget that your ancestors faced those prejudice, so then you feel threatened by like new immigrants coming in that are trying to erode your rights as an American.
And I think a lot of that comes down to like you said, like just straight racism. We look back to when 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment were all passed post Civil War during the Reconstruction period, and the the amendments clearly articulate that we're not going to have like any more slavery. We're giving everyone equal protection under the law, and then we're going to establish like general voting rights for everyone. And then we still have to go through the suffrage movement. But in the like 70 years between the end of this era to like Brown v. Board of Education to the Civil Rights Acts in the 1960s, like we couldn't even use those amendments to create the freedoms for individuals that weren't white because it had to be a state level like segregation or discriminatory act in order for anyone to have actually violated those constitutional amendments. So like, businesses could still segregate and be prejudicial based on their clients without ever violating the Constitution because you had to just have such words articulated and drafted. And so like America has an incredibly long history with racism. It's like we're eventually going to get there. Like I hope by 2030, 2040, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today just seems like incredibly archaic and like how did we ever like as a country take 40 years to get to like the point where everyone is welcome, everyone's providing some utility to the country, and we're just better off.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting when you talk about like the racism too, coming from like post Civil War until like the 1960s. If you think about it, that's like, you know, 50 or 60 years ago, what people were still getting lynched. by the color of their skin. You know, people were getting lynched for that. So
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy to think about.
And yeah, we had to use the Commerce Clause in the Constitution. It wasn't any specific amendment. It was Article 1, Section 8, the Commerce Clause, and then some other clauses that are in there. You got the Necessary and Proper Clause, the Supremacy Clause, which essentially says we're going to make it so that if you're being prejudicial against any sort of race, ethnicity, religion, you're taking away potential revenue for the national GDP. And if you do that, now we're going to take issue with it from a legislative and adjudicatory position. And that's the only reason why we got over all of the civil rights issues. And, it's still taken 40, 50 years for individuals to have been provided through the affirmative action cases to get, almost like a quasi-level playing field, but we still have generational divides between, people that grew up in the 60s that are still alive and now their grandchildren, great-grandchildren that are hopefully living in a more, like a land of opportunity that they themselves had to fight for. So it's pretty impressive if you look back at the last 100 years, like how this country has changed socially for the better.
Now, do you think that we're kind of getting to the point where we're doing better in terms of addressing like the systemic racism or prejudices that a lot of people face, or do you think we're still kind of fighting the good fight?
No, I don't think we're fighting the good fight and we're getting better, but you still have individuals that question the rationale for it. Like, why do we need to have affirmative action? Well, it's like, okay, if we just go and say everyone is equal, there's no more slavery, that's just a really shallow approach to analyzing the disparities between the races that were created by the Jim Crow era, by the Civil Rights era. And so there's still going to be generational gaps when we look at like family wealth and being able to afford going to schools, being able to live in areas where you can protect the living environment that you've signed a lease for or you purchased a home for, because you're not being taken advantage of because you don't have as much of that family wealth that we just mentioned. So I don't think we're making like huge leaps and bounds, but I think we're incrementally getting closer to a point in where like maybe by 2030, 2040, affirmative action won't be a thing because some of the gaps are much are closed essentially because we've given those opportunities to the families to catch up where for generations these white families were able to go to any school they wanted to and didn't have to worry about the financial burden to get there, the socioeconomic costs for their family while they were in high school and middle school to prepare themselves to go to college. I mean, there's like all these externalities that go into like affirmative action beyond just we say we're equal so we must be equal.
Where did you start getting I guess more aware or more woke, so to speak, of all these injustices that people face in our culture? I know, like, for me personally, I didn't start really understanding or really seeing like systemic racism or just health disparities, wealth disparities until like I got to med school in the last couple of years that I started appreciating all the lucky, or just by by the nature of how my parents were. I like appreciating how lucky that I was to be given all these things that I took for granted growing up in middle class suburban America, whereas a lot of people that live in the urban environments are facing a lot more disparities and challenges that makes it harder to really be equal, like you talked about. When did you start noticing that or start really appreciating or picking up on that?
Not till probably at some beginning of when I was serving in the military. I feel like I had somewhat of blinders up while I was at undergrad. High school, I had an idea of what went into it, but it wasn't until I started like earning my own paycheck and realizing like how important it was to budget. And then, not saying that having a dog is anything like having a child, but the costs that are involved, as small as they may be with having a pet, and you're like, holy crap! Like if I had to have a kid, or if I had to have a kid, I sound like so crass when I say that. If I had a child, the cost would be significantly higher. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
well then all of a sudden the military stations you around the country, and it's not like outside of like going to Seattle, or maybe like Hood near Austin. If you're not like near a major metropolitan area, most army installations are in not such good parts of the
Mm-hmm.
country, I think, financially speaking. So seeing, what finance does to, lower income individuals living outside of military installations, and just now having an understanding, going to Afghanistan the first time, being like, I am so fortunate to be an American, and then
Mm-hmm.
hearing the interpreters that are there that are struggling to get their visas approved to come over as, refugees. I started getting a really good sense of like my privilege, and then, if you can make an impact, do whatever you can, then I think you're almost obligated to, because you've not had to experience those struggles growing up, and so as like an American, you should be helping out your fellow Americans.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. They bring up that a lot, that you didn't really understand privilege until you got to be able to see the disparities that, from Afghanistan and other places. I don't know, like me personally, I didn't really, I think I must have, like, I don't know, like during the army, I didn't really appreciate a lot of the disparities or like privileges that I had. And it wasn't until I got to med school that I really started seeing all the, or just appreciating all the prejudices or all the, things going on. Especially because being, my med school's in Camden. So, and our school was pretty much founded with a mission to serve our community. So then, we had to do required community service every year in our communities. And then, I think looking back on it, it was like such a huge blessing in disguise, because like during going through it, I was like, this sucks. I have to do all this time in community service where I could be studying and, getting better grades and learning medicine better. But I think that looking back on the last 4 years, is like it really kind of changed my worldview and really changed, how I see things. And now I can really start, understanding a lot of these, how like wealth disparities or health disparities have impacts on, on your patient population, or a lot of have these like downstream, like second and third order effects from being living in like an urban environment, food deserts, these kind of things, access to health, access to education, all these huge things that, that I took for granted growing up, going through high school, West Point and the army. Like I didn't really appreciate and understand how important it was. Like growing up, where you're born and like what area code you're born into, or what area code you live in, can dictate your entire like life trajectory, and it's crazy.
It's unbelievable. And when I got to law school, the same thing. Because I tried to work with my interpreters in Afghanistan and making sure that at least their visas or their refugee applications went through and at least got approved by, the first flag officer. When I got to school, I volunteered with the Refugee Assistance Project, where like you help out with interviews with a translator, making sure that all the information that goes to the attorney that represents these clients, that are now in America awaiting, the refugee status and to get green cards, takes place. So doing that, I volunteered over the summer to go up for a day to help out a school in the Bronx as they were, handing out backpacks and school gear. And like you see these young kids that I don't think have a huge understanding of like what kind of financial background their parents have. They're just incredibly happy kids.
Mm.
And you sit there and you're like damn, like it seems so very simple. If you just give back a little bit, whether it's time or your resources, like you can make a huge difference in someone's life at like a very young age. With the COVID-19, I think they just came out with a study that said there's like a disparate impact on the African American community with getting the virus and becoming more sick, and the rate of hospitalizations and the mortality rate is increasing, amongst that community compared to, other communities within the United States. And it's like, why is that? What can we do? Because it's it's enough to acknowledge it, but if you don't do anything about it, and it was one of the things that frustrates me, is like I would love to run for public office, but I'm so frustrated by both parties, specifically like the Democratic Party, which I think I would probably lean towards and want to run and represent, because it just seems like a lot of whining and complaining. And it's one of the things that you're told in the military: don't come to me with a problem, bring a
Hmm.
solution too. And I never hear the solution. It's always either like a very far fetched, very expensive solution, that it's just not feasible, nor would it be efficient for the country, or it's just straight complaining and whining, and you're like, guys, there's a reason why Fox News like tries to tear you apart every single day, and then other people don't even want to watch CNN or MSNBC, because the problem with the media is that it's like low hanging fruit that they go after, and so it's super frustrating when you don't have representatives representing you in the Senate or in the House that actually have viable solutions long term to these problems, other than just throwing money at it. It blows my mind every single day I hear about a problem.
Yeah, I think a lot of my frustration with the issues that people face is that it's I feel like people either fall in like two categories of like people that respond to the news stories like that about how African Americans are disproportionately affected by COVID-19. You have one group that's like, oh, that's their fault. It's their fault. It's not our
Yeah,
fault. It's their fault. And then you have the other group of people that it's like there's something else going on, or like there's something bigger at effect here. And I really hate when people are always like, oh, it's their fault. Like everyone has the same opportunities being in America. Everyone has the same opportunities to wealth, health, and life, pursuit of happiness, whatever. But it's really not true. I think that
yeah,
you've seen it too, and then like I've definitely seen it in Camden and working with these communities and like low income communities, and that there are huge disparities in not only in wealth but health. And I think it's very interesting that you bring up the whole African Americans being disproportionately affected, because I think there's still like a population of doctors that don't believe in the social determinants of health. Like if you, I actually wrote about this in one of my papers for med school, and that there are some med school or medical educators or doctors that don't necessarily believe in teaching like social determinants of health, like where where you're living, like what race you are. These are very things. There are things that like play into how your health, that impact your health. For example, like living in the urban environment, you have things like food deserts where you don't have access to vegetables, like to fruits and vegetables and fresh produce. Your closest food source is like a corner store or bodega, so you get like like some meat products and then maybe some fresh fruit occasionally.
yeah,
And then you have like the whole security aspect too of like people say that to be healthy just walk. It's that easy to lose weight, just go outside and walk. But there's like whole populations where you can't go outside and walk around because you live in like an inner city. Like you say you live in like in Camden, New Jersey, where you're on the corner. If you walk to the corner, you have guys like corner boys like selling drugs, and you have shootouts like once a week there. So you can't really say that it's just that easy to lose weight. Just eat better and walk, because not everybody has the ability to eat better, and not everybody has
no,
the access to like physical fitness that we take for granted a lot of the time. So that's one of my big pet peeves, is that people are unable to empathize or unable to see the other party and how the other party lives, and they just chalk it up to flat out ignorance or laziness or stupidity, where there's a lot more at play than just that. And it's always worse in like the immigrant communities too. Like in Camden, you have all these like Hispanic immigrant communities that people love to shit on because they're here illegally, but they're not the healthiest because they can't be healthy, and then people just shit on them because they don't know any better. They're not smart enough to
right,
to live better.
right. And then you deal with stuff. We talk about security and like all those externalities that we talked about a little bit earlier with these kids growing up in elementary school, middle school, high school, preparing to even potentially enroll in a university. And like if your parents aren't educated or have like a real firm understanding of like an implied warranty of habitability, the basic things that your landlord should take control in the premises for, and ensure that that it's a livable environment, and that they'll fix stuff. Instead, they'll be like, no, like we're gonna waive that which you can't waive. Like you can't waive habitability. You can't say, okay, because this window's broken, I'm gonna cut rent off $100 for the month, but I'm not gonna fix it. Like that's something you can't do. But if you don't know anything about that, all of a sudden now you're growing up for how many years with a broken window? When it's cold out, when it's hot out, you've got to deal with that. Like, can you imagine trying to study in that environment and feel secure in that environment, and then to go off to college and not be worrying about your parents or your other brothers and sisters? Like, That's stuff that you have to take into account and what that
Mm-hmm.
does to your stress level. We talked about what stress does to your body, trying to lose weight and trying to stay fit. Like all these things have a compounding effect, and if we don't acknowledge them, then we're doing a disservice to the other Americans. I would recommend people go watch the Netflix thing. I think it's called Dirty Money, where they look at like Jared Kushner. His family's all realty royalty in the New York, New Jersey area, and how badly tenants are treated and taken advantage of. It's like, think of that on just a much larger scale for decades for one particular class of Americans, and then try to then argue with me that that doesn't have a lasting effect more than just 2 or 3 years. Like that is going to be generational. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's why you have to have social programs that are built in to ensure that Americans are given an opportunity to like get out of their social status, and to make whatever they want of themselves in this country.
Not to mention like all the legal concerns that you get to living in such a place. Like having access to legal representation is, I think, is a huge thing that you probably could speak a lot better about. But I love like hearing stories of some of the people that I knew, like that I volunteered with in med school. Like hearing some of their stories and some of the people, getting arrested in Camden for less than criminal offenses, to put it that way, and then being stuck in jail because they can't post bail because they don't have the financial stability to post bail, to hire a good lawyer to defend them. And then you contrast that with some of my other friends, who might have had some troubles with the law, but because they were from fairly wealthy families, or were financially more stable, and were able to get a lawyer that was able to represent them. It's just like, it's very clear how having money affects outcomes in America.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
kind of
And it's one
sad.
of the reasons we talked about before offline, but like I'm super privileged in the fact that the military paid for my undergrad degree as part of like the ROTC scholarship. The GI Bill is funding my law school degree. So it's like I've got, like, other than some small loans just to like live on for the next couple years, I've got a great opportunity to graduate law school with almost zero debt and
Hmm.
like use the degree for what it's meant for. And I think what a law degree is meant for is like helping shape and define like the current legal system in the country and make sure that everyone has access to it. So it goes back to like Fordham's mottos, in the service of others. You should use that law degree. And I almost wish that people, like, medical school and law school, you have to do like a public service route for 2 years before you can even think about branching off and doing something like financially lucrative, because it just defeats the purpose of having this really awesome tool at your disposal to
Hmm.
help a community, instead of just kind of, having that very selfish motivation to get them in the first place.
Yeah, I feel like almost frustrated, I guess, in that all these, like, we have, that we both, like you and I feel kind of frustrated that I'm able to see and appreciate like all these disparities and how these things play like a huge factor in people's lives growing up. But it's like there's not much that we can do about it. That's the thing that I think I find myself being most frustrated with. It's like, what can we, like you and me, non-politicians, not and people, not people of like, not decision makers, put it that way. We're not decision makers on how to like set policy and stuff like that. Like, what can we do to help bring up other people that are that need some help, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, we've got, the monthly Cronus Fit drive going on, where and we just got a great recommendation for I think next month, the shoes, for kids down in South America was one of the ones that someone recommended, like, using our funds to make sure that kids have access to just being able to wear shoes and just go to school. Like, that's a really cool drive. Like, stuff like that are, opportunities that I think small businesses can take advantage of, the resources that they have to make a difference. But I think the biggest thing is just education. And the biggest one right now is what people love to talk about, especially with COVID-19, is health insurance. I heard a story where there was a dude that was about to be put onto a ventilator, and one of the last things that they said to the nurse before being, is it intubated? Is that the correct
Mm-hmm.
term? Was like, who's going to pay for this? And like, you can talk about the rising healthcare costs and then trying to reward doctors for getting medical degrees. It's like, well, if the cost of medicine wasn't so expensive, um, then maybe that cost to the doctor visit wasn't going to be as much, which means that insurance would be more affordable, which means that hospitals didn't have to overcharge on basic services because of a fear of individuals coming in without insurance. And all of a sudden now these prices get dropped, and then doctors don't have to be paying $500,000 to get a degree,
Hmm.
in order to afford getting, a $300,000 to $500,000 salary. Like all those kind of things, you just like incrementally can just chip away, and then all of a sudden now you can go back to a country where like med school is not as expensive. People can go and afford getting that degree because doctors are being paid a good wage, because medical costs are down, because people can enjoy like a single payer health option. And I'm not advocating that we have to have one, but that's just like I think an incremental way that you can really identify how more people are better served by a larger, system rather than this like the competitive market.
Yeah, it's always like it's so hard for me because I feel like there are I can like options like a single health payer system for all would help in some regards, but I feel like they would also have some negative outcomes too from having a single payer system. By having by not having a free market system, then you start losing some efficiency in the market by having like by having a single payer system. It makes the market inefficient by not having competition too. But
I
at the same
think that
time,
goes
so.
back to patents, though. Like, I think the
Mhm.
big one for that would be uh, if individuals aren't going to get as much money from a drug they want to develop, then they're not like incentivized to produce the drugs. I would think the impact would be on the future development of medicine, not so
Mhm.
much the access to care, which for me would be uh, the larger pull to that kind of a system, rather than the impacts like on a Pfizer who can afford to make a drug less expensively.
Right. So I think that was one argument against the single payer system is that you lose some of the benefits of having a free market and competition and being able to produce and invest in drugs that in the future that may not be profitable but are essential for health. So I think it's like it's a very complex issue too that I am also not really sure what the right answer is too. Like I'm coming from the perspective that you are, whereas the army is paid for my undergrad and for my med school as well. So like I have zero financial like worries, I guess, for the future because I know that I'm gonna be like financially stable for the rest of my life essentially. But it's just like my other peers, coming out of med school with like $500,000 in debt. Like if we could move into like a single payer system, then my peers that have already poured the $300,000, $500,000 of money for tuition, like where do they get their return from for their
Right.
financial stability? And that's like the hard thing to kind of weigh because luckily I've been like lucky enough to not owe any a single dollar towards my education, but a lot of my peers owe like $500,000 towards their future um, careers. So like if they every dollar they lose in as a physician, they're losing as paying back on the loans too.
Right.
So
And
maybe.
and school costs though have gone up like astronomically. It's not even just law schools or med schools now. I mean, the like law school at Fordham full time is like 62K.
Mhm.
A year of undergrad at like Lehigh University right now, I think is like 62 to $64,000. Like, how is that? How does that make any sense to anyone? Like what I'm learning in this 1 year of law school, I would say, is like 10 times more useful than what I learned in a single year at Lehigh in undergrad for
Mhm.
basic classes with, English, and you've got to do a math class, and you've got to do like, your social sciences before you start moving on to your major. Like that makes zero sense. Like the educational costs right now in this country have to be something that's addressed too. It's not like, so all these things that we talk about, it's like there's all these tangential topics, but they all come back to
Mhm.
like rising costs that don't need to rise. Like I think it's just like an arbitrary increase. Like the costs for schools are going up significantly higher than our basic inflation is in this country. Like school should be half the cost of what it is now, because the dollar is not like 300,000 times more expensive than it was in the 70s. Like it makes zero sense how schools get away with that.
So what do you think is causing that? Because in my mind, because I think there's a reason why things happen. So like there's probably a reason why health or education's rising. And in my mind, it goes back to like big businesses or like the money that comes or the financial aspect that comes from student loans. Because like
For sure.
the college, the universities don't really profit that much from your tuition. Like as far as tuition goes, like that's a drop in the bucket for a lot of school endowments, right?
But they have huge endowments now. I think
Yeah.
like when I was at undergrad, someone said like the endowment was over $1 billion at Lehigh,
Yeah.
or several hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, why? What? Like,
Hmm.
it's not like we're getting a new building every other year. It's not like we're getting Chef Bobby Flay to come and cook our daily meals. Like, I don't see how the school has radically changed from when I was an undergrad there first in 2007 to now going into 2021. Like, it's not like I get a fucking update in a brochure saying, hey, every single person has a Tempur-Pedic bed and everyone's rolling around on scooters, and we've actually got hoverboards that are being created because we've invested all this money. It's like the education's the exact same and the campus hasn't been updated significantly. So where's all this money going to?
Hmm. And that's like my thing too. Is like the endowments a lot of these universities have. Like I think Harvard's like endowments like $7 billion. Like you think paying your what $30,000 a year or whatever it is for tuition is really that like they don't need your tuition to run a university.
No,
So
and
it's
they're
just like
only
I don't.
doing it because they want to look prestigious.
Hmm.
Like if you look at all the like the top private schools in the country, they typically have incredibly expensive programs, both undergrad and graduate. And so people automatically assume that if you're going to one of these private schools where you're shelling out 60, 70K a year, your return on that investment will be significantly higher than the kid that goes to just like the state school.
Hmm.
If I go to UVA, like in state, I think it was like 13 or 17K back when I was looking and applying, versus at the time, I think Lehigh was like 54K. And the draw for Lehigh was one, ROTC was going to cover it. But it's like, oh, you're right here, like New York City, Philadelphia, like you're going to get these big jobs with all these, big firms, and you're going to be coming out of school making 150, 160K. So that's why you're paying more, because we've got those connections. Like, I just think it's like a bullshit marketing ploy now. The higher
Hmm.
the education, the more return on investment.
Yeah, and it's just like, yeah, the whole education system in America is also like huge. I feel like a huge issue too, especially when it comes down to like student loans too. Because I think there's got to be something in the background between like the student loan companies and like the school administrators. Like, there's got to be something, some kind of like kickback programs going on because, I mean, like increasing tuition doesn't really benefit anybody when it comes to this besides the people that pay for it, e.g., like Sally Mae, Sally Mac, all those large you know companies that lend all this money to student loans. So I think that's like the only like benefit or party that's getting any benefit from the higher tuition costs.
Well, I think all the banks got out of lending. I think it's all now like government, where you fill out, like every year you have to refill out your FAFSA, and then you have
Hmm.
to reapply for financial aid because they were so concerned with big businesses just providing loans. But then the other one that like Betsy DeVos has taken a lot of heat for is there's a lot of these for-profit schools, and I think every school is for-profit at this point.
Hmm.
There's no like true like public interest school out there. But your DeVries, your University of Phoenix is like these schools are popping up. They're not accredited. People are taking classes, and like they're being told you can get your undergrad degree while working at the same time. And now they're taking out these huge costs, and then those schools are just crashing because nobody's graduating from them and getting those jobs that significantly increase their salary than before they even enrolled. And so like there's that huge issue because they originally the Department of Education could give people like an F, like this school sucks, like we're not going to give any loans for people to go here until they get their shit together. And then like Betsy DeVos cut that program because she's like, no, like schools need to be fighting it out for who's like ranked number one and who's accredited. It's like, no, like we got to do something as a country to make sure that at the end of the day the government can check in on you and say you are not providing the essential services that you're getting tax breaks for as like a school, and two, that we're providing students these very expensive loans for because you're not improving their lives after they graduate. Like that's the kind of stuff the government needs to be able to step in and go stop it.
What about like I feel like that's a huge like a perfect parallel into like the military military degrees, or like the military online colleges that everyone does.
Yeah, I think it's cool that what was it called? It was that really shitty uh, progressive spinoff that we always used to see on AFN, where it was like your CLEP gun college level entry program. Yeah, it was on AFN, and it would show like some soldier standing there, and then a fake. Who's the chick from Progressive? The one that's like she's got the short brown hair. She wears like the apron.
Flow.
Flo, yeah, it was like a fake Flo, and would come up with this like gun and be like, "This is your CLEP gun," and the guy's like, "Oh, I deployed 6 times, and I took like a writing course," and they're like, "Boom, college English done, chink chink," and then like I don't know how that translates to really
Oh,
having an effective experience. So like the CLEP program is one that like I don't get giving guys college credit just for being in the military. It's like no, you should be in a college room environment. Like you should be challenged by your teachers.
I don't know. I think I wasn't talking about that program. I think
Oh,
that's actually a great idea of doing that in terms of giving guys credit for stuff that they've done in the military. I think that's a great idea and a good initiative. I was talking more about like the online like college degrees that guys get from like what American Military University AMU, or like University of Maryland online, UMUC, or all these other random like pick whatever it is, like the guys that
like
always go.
Rensselaer, Polytech. I think that one's down in Florida. Yeah, I
Because
my
like
fear with that is, and I've told like the soldiers and rangers that I've had in my platoon where I've advocated for if like you think you want to get out, like get out. Like I want you to go and use the GI Bill that you've had, not so much for like you can only learn best in the classroom, but take a break. Like take the 2 years for your associates off and figure out what you want to do, what you want to study. Take 4 years off. It's easier said than done if you've got a family at that point and you've got bills to pay. But doing it on the same time online, it's like at that point it just seems like a check the box. It's
hmm
like all the majors that want to be competitive for battalion command get these like bullshit MBA degrees. Everyone that was at I say everyone like a couple people at MCCC wanted to go to Columbus State to get an MBA, and like why? Oh, I just need to have if I have a graduate degree, then that makes me more competitive for resident ILE. It makes me more competitive for battalion command and these key staff positions where it's like I don't think that the degree's worth the paper that it's printed on.
hmm
Like I would strongly advocate for taking a gap 2 or 3 years and going and getting your degree and coming back with actual knowledge that'll like, better the army than learning like some bullshit business practice from a dude at like a fourth rate, university.
hmm Yeah, I do think that I think it's like kind of similar into civilian education, but like the military has set up these programs for guys to get education in the military. But I think there's like these more scrupulous businesses take advantage of these programs and then get junior or lower enlisted guys or like NCOs who don't perhaps know any better about how the education system works, that think that they're getting the same thing by like giving up their TA or doing additional years to get these degrees, thinking that it's an equivalency to like an actual college degree. I think that's a huge disadvantage, and I kind of like a something that guys I think should be aware of when they try to do these programs is that you have to take into account like what the degree is actually worth.
And truly, like, what is the value to the military for getting these degrees for these guys if it's just a check the block? They're not being like really challenged with the degree or
hmm
using it. You look at the officers, it's like, why did you need an MBA to be a good battalion commander? Like, you didn't need it 30 years ago. Like, people would go and get it, but it's not like it was necessary. You used to need a graduate degree if you wanted to, teach at West Point because so many of the professors were, active duty military. But like I've run into a lot of E8s that I'm like, hey, you know, when's the next sergeant major board? Or are you up? And it's like, no, I don't have a degree. It's like, what do you mean you don't have? Why does that matter?
hmm
You should be leading soldiers. You should be that NCO that everyone looks up to because you've got 6 fucking deployments. You have your EIB, CIB. You're a senior jump master, but all of a sudden now this other sergeant major who took like a couple deployments off to get one of these online degrees who doesn't have any of the combat experience, who maybe isn't Ranger qualified. Like, these are the guys that are getting promoted because now they just look at that block and says, yep, got this, online degree. Doesn't translate at all, in my opinion. I don't think a degree translates at all to leadership potential, like whatsoever. And it's just like that's a frustrating thing in the military too now, if we're just pushing these degrees on people just to have them spend money to make them think for retention purposes that it's necessary, and then they don't get the leadership if they don't take advantage of it. Like, that's disingenuous.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think it's kind of I can see like what leaders intended on doing with something like that. Like, the intent is to, like, have more educated leaders with that. But the second order, or like the unintended consequence of that, is that guys are then sacrificing, their time and money on these programs that at the end of the day don't really produce any, benefits or any effects for the force or for leadership, whatever.
I mean, this goes back to broadening too. Like, now, degrees aside, you look at all of the, like, senior officers at places like the 82nd Airborne, like all the battalion commanders, brigade commanders, division commanders, like, all these individuals have just gone back and forth to the Ranger Regiment, and like very few have any broadening experiences like whatsoever. And I'm speaking in very general terms here, but most of them, it's only been like a little bit of staff time, but company command, like battalion S3 time at regiment, battalion command in the regular army, battalion command in the Ranger Regiment, some sort of a brigade or division level experience, and then coming back as a regimental commander or going straight into brigade command. And then people are at the same time advocating, yeah, you should go volunteer to be like an ROTC instructor. You should take some time off and do this. But it's like none of the senior leaders that are like actual leaders take any time off whatsoever. So it's like, what is the actual need to do these programs, whether it's broadening or, your master's level education, if the guys that are advocating for it don't have it, or didn't even take advantage of it because they knew that in order to be a leader, you have to stay in and actually lead. Like, it's just, you get conflicting messages. Like, why is that important for me to go and volunteer for this program in the Army rather than just staying and just going and getting a second or third company command? That makes as little sense to me as some of the educational argument.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I guess depending on how you set up the system too, like I definitely see the utility in doing all these broadening assignments and doing all these like non-leadership roles. But then at the end of the day, the Army still rewards those who didn't do that with the leadership positions that, the highly coveted leadership positions. So it's kind of a shame.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about from, where America was, and all of a sudden, we're here with, some improvements to the military. But I think at the end of the day, it's just like, what is the actual fix to the problem that we're identifying, versus what's just identifying the problem and leaving it there. I would say for this conversation, graduate level degrees should not be a necessity for the privilege of commanding or leading. And nor do I think that these broadening assignments are necessary for individuals to be effective battalion and brigade and division commanders. Like that, it just does not make sense. Like, muddy boots are muddy boots, and all this staff time stuff, like, there's individuals that can go handle that. I don't, I don't need, I don't need like my ultimate warrior to be my ROTC instructor. What I need to be my ultimate warrior is the brigade commander who's going to authorize me to, go forth and execute a very violent plan of action without any hesitation.
Yeah.
I don't need to know that they worked in Congress for 2 years doing some bullshit like appropriation stuff for some senator.
It's like not all broadening assignments are created equal, and not all degrees are created equal either, for that matter.
100%. No, 100%.
But I think this kind of echoes what we were talking about with Brian and Pete about leadership, about talent and managing talent in general in the military, and then I guess how the military doesn't do a very good job of managing talent in general. And I think I'm actually kind of glad that we kind of touched on it last week talking to them, but like the new system of like positions, the AIM system or whatever it is. Like, I think that's a pretty good initiative that should be interesting in the future to see what happens to the military with that initiative.
And it's funny though, we talk about like what it takes to be a leader. I'm trying to think of, like, we have a pretty like bureaucratic model within the army as far as like that next position. And it's really interesting because they always tell you, like when I was fighting for company command and waiting, and same with like, getting your platoon leader position, it's like, oh, whenever you show up, essentially, you're just waiting in a queue. Well, when that stops, like battalion command, how many friends, I know I'm not saying like to be tabless is bad, but how many tabless infantry officers do you see as battalion commanders of infantry battalions?
None.
I
Oh.
can't, I can't think of any. I
Yeah.
can't think of a single tabless infantry battalion commander for a light striker airborne battalion ever. But it's like we don't care about that though when it comes to company command.
Mm.
So why all of a sudden do we have this distinction that we have to draw? It's not because all of a sudden all these tabbed ranger qualified infantry officers did a broadening assignment that they got their battalion command positions. It was like, no, it was a very simple test probably for that division commander and slotting and that corps commander. Oh, dude had this many deployments, ranger qualified, EIB, CIB. Okay, like he's met the minimum standards. It's like, so it wasn't like, oh, this guy wrote a really excellent paper when he was at the War College about deforestation and warfare. We should give him a battalion command. It's like, no, this guy has muddy boots. Put him in command. Like and then it just goes back to like, why do we give people and not have the right talent management system? And the last thing I would say on that, I remember when I was a brand new second lieutenant at IBOLC, the brigade commander for IBOLC Airborne School, and maybe it wasn't RTB at that point. But he wore a red beret. His colonel comes in, and an article had just come out saying like all the best leaders are getting out of the army, and we all had to read it, and it had like very interesting points. I would go search it if I were you listening, and just take it in and have formulate an opinion on it. But he was like really pissed off that this was even written, and he says like, I don't think this guy writing has any idea what the best officers in the military look like, because after all, I'm standing right here. I consider myself one of the best. I'm still here. I'm in command. Like, what does that say about me? It's like, it says that you clearly did not understand the text that was in front of you, or have any sort of humility when it came to saying that, you were not hot shit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what Brian and Pete were saying was like spot on as far as like a shitty talent management system. And now having gotten out and seeing like where some of my peers are at, it's like, I'm glad. Like, I don't want to switch.
Yeah, because I think that whole thing about command, like, it's because like if you stay in long enough, everyone gets the command. Isn't that like the kind of the mentality behind it? It's,
Yeah, it's like de
I don't really
facto command.
understand that. Yeah, like I mean, I don't know what other job or occupation that you'd have the right to have a certain job if you stay in long enough. I don't. That's not effective talent management. Like maybe from as like a second lieutenant, like everyone should have the same opportunities as like a lieutenant. You should have the same opportunities to get the same training. But like past that, like you should know, you know, um, if you're gonna stay in or not, or stay for command. It's just like I feel like you had to be a little bit more stringent on who you pick to be commanders because not everyone deserves the command.
No, 100%. Now I remember when I got here, we found out that the brigade was going to Afghanistan, and it's not the Afghanistan of 2001. It's definitely not the Afghanistan of 2010 or 2015. Like Afghanistan and the war there has shifted greatly as to what deployments look like. But even with that being said, and knowing what the missions were going to be, it's like, okay, you have this giant pool as a brigade commander of all the potential commanders to take forward to Afghanistan and give leadership roles. You're not fucking around anymore at this point. Like, so if you are in company command or you are waiting for company command, you don't have a single deployment. You have a deployment with no CIB. You're not Ranger qualified. Like, you're not the most fit looking individual. Like, those guys, like, transfer them out, get them out. Like, put the guys in that are waiting in the pipeline that have CIBs, that have like maybe more than one Afghan rotation or have an Iraq rotation, have guys that went and did stuff like serve in the 75th, have guys that served in those platoons, those second platoons that you get, like the scout platoon, or taking over a mortar platoon, or were XOs. Like that should be stuff that you're immediately filling those positions with and saying, hey, sorry you didn't get a full 18 months in command, but we're going to Afghanistan. I can't risk my soldiers because you either A, didn't have the experiences, or maybe were unfortunate enough not to get the experiences. You didn't get yourself qualified out of IBULLOC or after MCCC, which is like a requirement for everyone to go. And then 3, maybe you went to like a selection, like an SFAS, and weren't selected and don't have a tab. Like that's almost like a fucking red flag. Like, don't put this guy in anything. Like, failed Ranger school, has no deployment, has no EIB, failed SFAS. Like, give him a command in Afghanistan. Like, are you serious? Is that like the kind of like success story you want the soldiers and young lieutenants to look up to? Like, I'm super biased by this because I'm still very salty about the management of like my peers when I was in the brigade, because there were so many individuals that like I knew that came in from Ranger Regiment that I consider better officers than like my own experience. And I was like, these guys should go ahead of me in the queue. And not to mention, the day they show up, they should be given a guide on. Like, that's the kind of dude that I would follow. If you said, hey, you're a saw gunner in this guy's company now, I'd be like, I'm good. Like, fuck yeah, I'll do whatever he says. But then you're like, no, he's going to go up in the Brigade 3 shop for 16 months. Then, he's earned his command after. Like, what kind of fucking system is that?
Yeah, it's like I always wonder, like, why don't they just put the more qualified people in? It's like,
because they do that for battalion command, but
yeah,
like, we just don't care for companies. Like, the like last real leadership position you could have in combat, where you're like running around with your platoons, like that should be the one that you're probably the most protective of. Like, any lieutenant can go in and get experience as a platoon leader, but the guy that's got to orchestrate potentially 3 to 4 platoons, all of the air assets, the other battalion missions that are going on, adjacent, the terrain of Afghanistan, like that should be the dude that's the most competent and has proved himself up to that point. Now, you can probably guess that I'm not the most like humble when it comes to identifying some of my peers, and so maybe that rubbed some battalion commanders the wrong way. Sorry, not sorry. Like, all I wanted to do was to make sure that soldiers were taken care of, and like when we don't have that, like, it take me out of the equation. If I see one of my buddies come into a brigade, that dude should be the number 1 company commander, like in that pipeline for the next dude that fucks up.
yeah. I think my worry is that if by not giving everybody a chance, you miss out on possible talent that has not been illuminated quite yet. Because I know, like, at least for me, like, my lieutenant time would have been drastically different from my captain time, like how I perform, And it's just like, maybe some people just before they became a commander never had the opportunities to go to the selection or go to Ranger school, and maybe by giving them that selection, or the command is giving them the opportunity to excel.
Yeah, again, like, having a Ranger tab is not an indication that you will be a great leader. But as like an infantry officer, when you have all of these like building blocks that you have to use in order to be like a successful second lieutenant at IBULLOC, it's like that's just like taking a test. Like, for me, I looked at Ranger school, and there's like a lot of stories for guys that why they failed, whether it was injury, whether they've failed on peers. But at the end of the day, it's like, all right, I've spent the last 6 months learning how to throw a baseball, hit a baseball, and use a catcher's glove to catch a baseball. And now all I've got to do is go and show that I can swing a bat, catch the pop up, and then throw it back to home plate. If I can't do any of those 3 things, did I really even have any good grasp of what I was taught? Like, it's like just mastering the basics. If a private can go there, I had a ranger that showed up after RASP, was sent to us mid-row, got back within a month, went to ranger school, and went straight through. So if you're telling me that this 19-year-old can do it, you coming after 4 years of college, getting like a 4 to 6 month train up where they're teaching you exactly what you're going to be tested on at ranger school, and you've already demonstrated you've got this like mental proficiency having graduated college. If you can't put all those things together, like how much more of an opportunity do you need? It's not like when you go to the NFL. If we're a professional organization, if who's the quarterback for the Browns? I'm already forgetting. Baker Mayfield. That dude's had like 2 pretty shitty seasons. I don't think you're going to give him very many more if he's running your franchise. Like, bring the next quarterback in. Like, get the next pipe swinger up there. This dude is This dude's out. Like, why do we have to give you 6 years of opportunity in the army to prove
Mm,
yourself if you
mm.
couldn't do it in the first three?
Very true. Yeah, very true. Yeah, also like I remember when I went to Ranger School, we had a kid come out of AIT, like a kid fresh out of AIT or OSIT, get his Ranger tab, first time go and everything. That's pretty badass. Kid was like 18 years old, finishing OSIT, went to Ranger School after OSIT.
Yeah, that's bad. It was like, and people always ask too, like, what do you have to do to prepare for Ranger School? It's like the classes are taught to you
Hmm.
at the level of what most of the individuals going through represent. So that's like your PFCs, that's like second lieutenants, and then like guys from a unit that may be like, specialists or brand new E5s. So it's not like it's getting taught to like this master's level program. It's like they teach it to the lowest level there. So it's not like rocket science. There's a book that you can buy before you even go and read every single fucking instructions that they're going to give you, and then just put it to use before you even get there. It's like the test is open book. You
Literally.
literally open book. Like you take out your handbook and they're like, "Hey, did you follow steps 1 through 6 when you set up the patrol base?" No, okay, well, page 534, go check it out. It's all about patrolling. Like, you could have read this in your downtime. And
Yeah.
that's for me, that's what's frustrating. It's like, we talk about grit and getting after it and like taking some ownership of yourself and your position. Like, that goes a long way. And I think the most successful people are the ones that like do some of that like self-teaching and know what they're going to go and get themselves into and come prepared. Like, you can't just show up and be like, what? Oh, I have to. The barrel goes that way. Turn the gun around. Like, you're already struggling.
Man. Yeah, I was gonna say like I didn't know shit in Ranger School. I probably looking back on it didn't. I probably still don't know shit after Ranger School either, but definitely was a great test of some fortitude, mental fortitude, and physical fortitude that I've never had before. And that's one thing
I
I
mean,
got out of Ranger School.
like, you're an FA guy and you went and got your tab and then you went to the Ranger Regiment. My dad, like, didn't join ROTC, had no idea what the Army did. Like, did ROTC for a year and a half while he played basketball up at school. Graduated FAOC at the time, or whatever, FAOIC, whatever they called it, back in the early 80s, and then went straight through Ranger School right after that. They were like, "Who wants to go to Ranger School?" And he was like, "I don't know what it is. Sure, send me." And then goes straight through. It's like, listen, if a dude coming out of like South Jersey that played basketball his whole life, that went into the Army kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, I'm FA. Oh, cool. Oh, what's this school that I go? Yeah, sure, send me to that school. If he can do it, like, come on, guys. Like, especially coming out of IBOLC. Like, there's so many like sad weeping stories. Like, the rest of it just comes down to perseverance
Mm.
and like actually showing that you can like retain information that's given to you.
Yeah, like personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's
But
definitely.
segueing off of that, like, leaning forward outside of COVID, let's talk fitness goals. Because, like, you want to do, what is it, an ultra?
Yeah, so I would like to do an ultra marathon in the fall. The Pacific Northwest has a lot of really nice ultra, like trail running ultras, just because it's the Northwest, so they have a ton of state parks and national parks that you have a lot of trails there. So I would like to do an ultra marathon, like a 50 miler in the fall. That's my goal.
It's fucking nasty.
Yeah, it's just
Disgusting.
I don't know if I've talked about it on here with you, but that I know we've talked about it before in the past about how for me like doing a long endurance, like an hour run, is probably like one of my favorite things to do because it's like you get to in a very meditative state where like I don't really listen or like hear anything. Like I usually will throw on like a podcast like every other run if I'm going for a long run just to have something playing. But I actually can't tell you what I hear in the podcast or what I've heard in the podcast. It's just that like it's just noise for me, and that's just how
Yeah.
when I do well, just when I work out in general, it's just usually just noise for me in the background. But I just find it to be like any hour plus workouts to be like meditative or like it's like the ultimate in mindfulness where I feel like while I'm like running, I like kind of scan my body to see how my body feels, like paying attention to how my body feels. I don't know. I just really like the being in that endurance state of like that low intensity and just kind of just flowing with it, I guess.
So we're gonna look forward to hearing about an ultra come like October, November.
Yeah, I would say like a September, October time frame.
So have you started training up for this? I know you
Kind of.
started running.
Yeah, I started running last week. Started ramping up my mileage. I'm
You
up
can't do
20
this
miles
cold
a
like
week.
you can't do this cold like you
No,
did the marathon.
that was probably one of the most painful things I've ever done was running a marathon cold, or running a
I
marathon without training for it.
so for those of you that don't know, couple for a couple years, like it'd be like, Bobby, how much have you run this year? And you're like, I do some intervals, but essentially the Army 10 miler is it. And so long as I can hold a Ranger standard for the Army 10 miler, I know I'm in good shape. And then it was like, oh, I'm just gonna do a marathon. You're like, wait, you've only run 10 miles this year? And you're like, yeah. Yeah, and you're like, oh, I just finished the Philly Marathon. It's like, okay, now we definitely have to train up. You can't go into a 50 miler in the Pacific Northwest and not
Yeah.
doing anything.
Yeah, the running joke from med school is that my yearly mileage was 20 miles because I would do the Broad Street Run, which is a 10-mile run in Philadelphia every May, and then do the Army 10-miler in like I think it's like in September or October I think is when I usually do it. So I usually only run 20 miles a year, and then since last week I've actually run 40 miles in 2 weeks now,
It's great,
which
man.
I've like doubled my yearly mileage already in two
Hell
weeks.
yeah. Hell yeah.
But yeah, like last November, I ran the Philly Marathon without training for it. I went from couch to marathon in 5 hours, I would say, or whatever it is, couch to marathon. But it was very painful. I finished it, which was my goal, was just to finish the marathon. But it was very painful. The last I think like 10 miles or so was that was a gut check, major gut check.
Yeah,
It
well,
was
now
good.
your goal is just to break 2 hours on the marathon, right? We'll get you in some nice Nike Zoom flies or whatever they're called.
Yeah, I say if I could qualify for Boston, that'd be kind of sweet. But I don't know if I'll do that. But yeah, that's the goal: ultra marathon in the fall, and
Hell
then
yeah,
you
man.
are gonna do something also on the endurance side as well.
Yeah, I'm looking to do an Ironman in the next year. Uh, I've got my shoes. I've got like my heart rate device set up. Unfortunately, all the bike stores are closed. Otherwise, I'd go get fitted for a decent like road bike. And then the apartment I'm moving into has a pool, so I was like, I need to do something because I don't feel like I'm like lost as far as like physically what I'm training for. I was in the army; it was very easy to be like, oh, I'm training up to get back to regiment. Oh, I'm training for my goal in the long run is to do the long walk. So
Hmm.
like that's another like backstop. But now it's like, do I want to do a bodybuilding, program? Do I want to do like a functional fit? And I feel like, and then I was like, oh, Ironman, like hell yeah, like I can do that. Like fuck.
Yeah, that's kind of like my mentality too. Is like I've done CrossFit for more than a decade now at this point, so it's just like I think I've gotten to the point where I know I'm probably gonna be as good as I want to be at CrossFit without going full time CrossFit. I put it that way. You know what I mean? So like, there's not much else for me to train for. Like, I'm not training for the ACFT. You can kiss my ass. I'm not training for that. So there's like
No.
you were saying, there's like very few things to train left or train for left at this point. And then now it's just like the endurance or like you get in the kind of the niche sports of like strongman, powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting. You go that route, or you can go
Yeah.
like the endurance route. Which depends on what you're gonna do. But I always think it's good to train for something.
I think that's exactly it. Because like I was, the hard part is like staying motivated and then having like a consistent diet. It's like unreal how having an inconsistent diet with like a
Mm.
fitness goal just makes both completely trash. Like you can't, like I've not been able to put on size in the program. I'm like on a size program. I've put on no size whatsoever. My lifts are whatever. Like I am not happy with where my cardio is right now. It's like I just need to like literally do a 180, put some stuff on the back burners. Like you always want to have those goals to be able to like. I just want to make sure I can always squat, front squat, back squat 315, deadlift 5, like, you know, put up a 1 rep bench at 315. Like if I can just maintain that general level of fitness, but also do like a
Hmm.
marathon, a long swim, a long bike, I was like, I feel like holistically like fit and mental too.
Yeah, that's exactly like the great point to have because it's like you can either spend like your time because you get like diminishing returns and like something that you're already good at, so you get rapidly diminishing returns. Definitely in terms of like strength, like it takes like years to add like 10 pounds like to your back squat now at this point
Yeah.
versus like to transition to something new and work on something new and then be having much more bang for your buck, getting good at something new.
I mean, like I think when I was doing like a good amount of strength, like my deadlift was my best lift, and I think I got up to like over the course of a year, I went from like a 500-pound deadlift to like a 535. And then in like the year and a half, 2 years after hitting that 535, I never got higher. Like, and I tried with you the one time when we were at the gym where I was like, I'll try to pull like 550 because 520 felt pretty good. And I didn't even I barely moved the bar. It's like, okay, like, do I really need to like try to work up to pulling 600 pounds? Like, what is that doing for me in the long run? Other than like just increasing the chance my spine's going to shoot up my ass.
Yeah, just like once you get to a certain point, like for me, it's like my back squat. Like I have not gone heavy in a back squat in years, but I can still probably walk up to a bar and like throw in like 365, and that probably like a heavy single-ish. Like probably like max at like 405, like 400 usually like to hold my back squat as like a 1 rep max. So it's just like I can either spend all my time on improving like a single lift, like a back squat or like a snatch or something like that, or I could just take that time and just get really good at running or like do something that I've never done before or like run an Ironman, like instead of spending all this time on like adding 50 pounds to my back squat, which isn't
Yeah, I
gonna
was
do
really
much.
hoping though, when you said you were going to do the ultra, I was like, because like I always, after you and Brian, I always like end up finding more motivation when I find out you guys are doing something. It's like, oh, Brian went to SFAS. I'm like, shit, I need to do something cool. Oh, Bobby's in med school. Shit, I need to do something cool. And then when you're like, I'm going to do an ultra, I was like, fuck. All right, I'm going to do an Ironman. Hey, Bobby, do you want to do an Ironman instead? And you're like, fuck no. It's like, God damn it. Like, this would be so much better if I had a training partner.
I would actually probably enjoy. I think Ironman is actually probably on my like list of things to do. Just that
So
I'm
do it
not.
now, and then I'll sign up for an ultra with you. Do it now, and then I'll sign up for an ultra with you.
I'm just not very good. I'm not a good swimmer. Well, I'm pretty good swimmer like distance wise. So actually,
That's
I
all you
might
have to do.
actually pretty
2.1
decent.
miles. That's
Yeah.
all you got to do.
Cause I've swam like a mile in the pool before. That's what like just randomly like I swim laps every so often, just for fun. And I've swum a mile
I'll let
before.
it. I'll let it marinate. Just
Yeah.
let it marinate. You think about it.
Maybe we'll do an Ironman together at some point. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And we
I
can get
think-
like a tandem bike.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's legal, but like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah. Very
Sorry,
cool.
guys. I'm a veteran. Like, I have to ride with him. It's a thing. Sorry.
Yeah, but what you were saying about like the company that you keep being very important, I think that's a great point that you bring up because it's like, it's very hard to keep yourself motivated if you don't have, people around you, not really to like inspire you, but people around you that are doing like really high speed things. Like it's a lot easier to keep yourself on track if you're surrounded by very high performing individuals. So that's one thing that I always tell people is to like, watch the company that you keep and watch people that you hang out with because who you hang out with says a lot about who you are as a person, and that if you look at like the people you spend the most time with, like the group of 3 or 5 people you spend the most time with, you probably very similar to those 3 or 5 people. So you
Good
just have
looking, fit, tattooed.
pretty
All my
much. I
friends
mean,
are models.
but you got but seriously, that's one thing that I want you guys to take away from is that to look around you, and that if you're like the top of your group, then you probably need to find a different group of people to hang out with. And it's kind of shitty to say, cut people out of your life, but sometimes it's good to cut people out of your life that are not helping you out in any or benefiting you in any
And challenging
regards.
you.
Yeah, that aren't challenging you. Like I love the guys that we hang out with. Like our group chats are great because I can always, if I'm like not into something, I can always pull on my phone and just be like, should I do this? And then everyone's like, yeah, why not?
Why are you complaining?
Yeah,
Like,
why are you asking us? So I think it's always good to have people that are, and it's always good to have people that are down to do crazy things too. Like that's one thing I do miss the most about being separated from everybody, things like separate from you and other guys in the military, is that I can't do like text my buddy to go do like a killer session at the gym. like Saturday Suckfest used to be my favorite day of the week because that means that used to mean, I get together with the boys or girls, whomever, get together with a group of people that love to suffer and suffer together with some friends. But being in New Jersey, I don't have access to the same level of mental toughness that I get in the
Yeah.
military.
Like I used to love going to Audi on Saturday mornings. My buddy Nick, who was a PL with me at 175 in the same company, like we get after like a really good strength portion, we get some accessory work, and then we would just absolutely kill ourselves on the runners that they got there on the assault bikes. Outside, we had like mapped out where a quarter mile was. Speaking of which, if you have my Nalgene, I will kill you because I lost it years ago. It was a green. No, it was a clear Nalgene. It had the DUI on it. It had very like specific Savannah type stickers. Had stickers that only I would have had. I put that out there as a turnaround point, and after the second set, I came back and that Nalgene was gone. So if you were at Fort Benning, probably Task Force 128, because those are the only people at Benning that wouldn't respect that DUI. Being from the 3rd Infantry Division, like I'm assuming it was you guys. That's all I'm gonna say. I'll find you. I will get my Nalgene back. I promise, as God is my witness, that Nalgene will be back in my possession. And if you know who took my Nalgene back in 2016, send me their names. I want to know.
Yeah. That was like what you just said about Saturdays going to Audie Murphy. That was like one of my favorite things to do was like text the crew, go up to Saturday mornings. What's everybody doing? Let's go to the gym and thrash.
Yeah. It was always the
Hoping to do
best too
something
because
similar.
you would see the Rangers that didn't want to go to the CRTF. It's like, oh, who's got black chucks on in here? All right, I know they're down to throw down some weight. Like, if you're not in the squat rack putting up big numbers and you don't have black chucks on, like, see ya.
Yeah.
This is the second home.
I do enjoy. I do remember when I was up at Lewis over the summer for my away rotation, going to the gym and being like, this guy's a Ranger. This guy's from 275. He just looks like a Ranger. And it's funny because you can walk into the gym and just look around. And you can just kind of tell like who does what or who's had what experience just by how people work out and train. I think that's another cool thing too.
It's amazing too. Like I think the last thing that I'll hit on for this Easter Sunday, it's like the reason why I loved Regiment is because we talked about how functionally fit the Rangers were, but it's not like they were just strong and fast. Like they worked so much on technique when it was cleaning and doing jerks, snatches. I think if you went to Audi, the only guys that would snatch in there were either like guys that did Olympic weightlifting in college, and a lot of them were West Pointers because it's one of the only schools that actually has a program for that, or dudes from Regiment because they knew that like technique was crucial. But I would never see like anyone else doing any sort of Olympic weightlifting in Audi. It was always the same crews.
Or Chandler Smith.
Yeah. Friend of the podcast. We're not worthy. He is so strong and so fit.
Yeah.
And I'm so jealous of his gym setup.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to Chandler Smith. But I remember, what was it? It was when he was there for, I guess, Armor Bullock, A Bullock. I would run into him at Audie Murphy in the morning sometimes when he was in Bullock and I was in 375, and just, watching him work out was great. And then
there's a dude they called Baby Hulk that I think like snatched 315 one time on the platforms right there in front of the thing, and he was at A Bullock, and just like, Jesus, like I wish I'd gotten into this way sooner.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's very humbling too going to the gym, especially Audie Murphy, because like that's one thing that I always enjoyed about being in at Audie Murphy was that you're never going to be the strongest one in the room or like the fastest one. Like Audie Murphy, there's some studs that go to Audie Murphy.
Yeah, if I go there, I understand it. Like I'm not the strongest, I'm not the fastest, I'm the best looking. I'll take 1 out of 3, on a standard Saturday. But I mean, like I remember we did a great workout at Audi one time. It was I think it was snatches and rows. I think it was what was it? It was like 15, 12, 9, 6, 3 of snatch, and then like a 20 cal row. Do you remember that?
No.
Yeah, I do. I don't think I won either.
It's like the only workout that I remember us doing was that was it the front squat and burpee workout we did in Carson that one year?
It wasn't a front squat, it was a clean. It was a 135 clean, 10 rounds of 10 and 10 burpees over the bar, right? Or was it 10 to 1?
I thought it was like 10 to 1 of something. I don't know.
Yeah, I got my ass kicked on that. That was awful.
Mm.
I was so confident. For those of you who don't know, I had been at Carson for over a year. I felt very acclimated. My lungs were just massive at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could have run to Pikes Peak and back, and Bobby's coming out from sea level, and I just remember like, you know what? It's been 3 years of getting my ass kicked by this guy. Like this day, welcome to day number 1 of the rest of your life. I'm gonna crush you. And then I lost to him by like 3 minutes. He finished, and I had like a couple, like maybe I was on like the set of 3 or 4, and I was just like, I'm not even gonna bother pushing myself at this point. Like I have lost. This is so embarrassing. This was my only thing that I was looking forward to with his visit was finally beating him.
But that was like the peak of my CrossFit fitness. I'll put it that way, though. That year was like the peak of my CrossFit fitness. It's been declining ever since.
Or we would do workouts too, where like we would each pick a movement, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna pick stuff that I know I'm gonna beat him at. Rowing, assault bike, and then he'd be like, oh, and then we're gonna do burpees. Be like, and I lost. Like I cannot cycle this shit whatsoever. I do 10 burpees, I will die.
Because you're like 6'5".
Thank you for getting that right.
It's very. I will say that being shorter is very beneficial in CrossFit, and that's why Matt Frazier is number 1 in the world, because he is 5'6", right?
If that.
Yeah, he is. Sorry, Matt Frazier. Any Matt Frazier fanboys listening to this, I still love you, but that is a small human being.
Yeah. Congratulations for being so fit, though.
Yeah.
And you can grow facial hair too. We know that. And you've got some nice tattoos. We know this as well. Like, don't get butthurt just because we identify that you're short. All right.
Yeah. But I'm sure
there's a lot of great short people. Josh Bridges, another
Noah
fantastic
Olsen.
short athlete, also a Navy SEAL. Does not have a book out yet. Like, great human beings.
Oh, that was another segue that I was gonna ask you about. How many Ranger books do you know? Have you ever read any Ranger books?
Yeah, Spearheaders.
I've never read that one.
Yeah, it's about the beginning of the First Ranger Battalion up in Carrickfergus, and they're like train up and
like World War
Operation
II.
Torch. Yeah. Outside of that and Black Hawk Down, which I've never read because there's a movie.
But there's not like Ranger. They're not like Ranger about Ranger books.
The other one, the sniper wrote a book. What was it called? The Reaper.
Oh yeah.
Dude from Third Bat.
Oh yeah, Irving.
Yeah, I don't know literally any other Ranger books. I mean, it's like before every single mission, it's like, you're not going to be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I've always wondered that
to be talked about, and they want to make.
Yeah, I've always kind of wondered like why SEALs love to write books, whereas the other military branches don't write books. Like SF, I guess SF has a couple books, but they're not like huge. Like CAG doesn't have like any like title books. Like
I just think it's because of the environment. So, like the SEAL community in general is such a small group, but they're surrounded by so many people that, like within their naval branch, don't do anything remotely close to what they're doing. So it's like almost, I can talk about this. It's cool. Green Berets work a lot with the conventional army. So it's, again, one of those, I can tell my story. I think the Rangers, because you're just such like a close-knit thing, and all you really experience is other Rangers, that all the missions that you go on or you have the opportunity to take part in, you're like, oh yeah, that's another day. I don't need to write a book to talk about it, because literally every single dude in this organization has the exact same experiences. So like, why am I special?
Yeah. Yeah, I almost wonder if it's like doing the regiment a disservice for not having like books or like more, I guess, publicity for it. But I guess it's probably a good thing too. That's what this uniculture the way it is.
I think it's great. It's like the silent professional. It's like you can like talk about your experiences. I think like we do, like we talk about how great the Rangers are and how much we love the regiment and the things that we learn from it. But I just don't see how talking mission specific things in public, or like putting it down on paper, like that's your experience, it doesn't need to be shared with anyone. It's not gonna like other than like trying to get cool points. It does no benefit to like tell war stories like that. I just don't
It's
think
true.
there's a purpose.
Yeah, I think that's very true. How you're saying, like, for a lot of seal books, I think it's mostly like driven by personal greed, perhaps, for just getting a book, and then or the fame, maybe driven by like fame and greed versus like driven by spreading the word about an organization or like
Killing Osama, like that, the guy that said he shot Osama bin Laden.
yeah.
We already know how the mission went, man. Like there was a crashed helicopter. It was in Pakistan. You
Hmm.
got him. You took him back to an aircraft carrier. Why? Why did you need to write a 250-page book about it? Like Lone Survivor. It's like a really, it's like a fucked up story. Like it sucks. Like the whole, like it just seemed like a total tragedy from the loss of life, especially when it comes to like all the special operators that were involved in that.
Hmm.
But like, why did you need to write a book about it? I don't understand because it raises a lot of questions about uh, the type of mission that was undertaken, the risks that were taken in that mission, and like the huge loss of life. And then it's just like, was what that mission was for that worth it? And then like at the end of the day, why did you need to write a book about it? Like you could have gone and told these families individually, like, hey, like I think one of the guys' name was like Axe, uh, was a stud on this mission, like saved my life. Murphy, another stud. Like, why do we need to write books? I just don't understand it. Like, those are your experiences. They tell you over and over again, in the regiment at least, like, do not talk about this. Like, you're professional. Whatever happens, like, if it needs to get out, Big Army will write a story about it. And
Hmm.
it will be watered down. But I don't need your personal take on stuff. I just shut up.
But don't you think that's like part of like almost like history? Like you want people to understand, what happened, like the lives that were lost. Like, you know, it's different like reading a book about lone survivor versus like reading a history book or like reading the Wikipedia article for the same thing. It's a little different.
I don't know. I think if you write a book about a specific event, like it needs to be there should be like then there should be a historical context to it. So I know in like Lone Survivor he talks the first part of the book about going through buds
Hmm.
and getting there and shaping this operation. Um, but like talk about the rest of the stuff with what the Rangers are doing at the same time to get in there. Talk about the aftermath. What happened in the immediate subsequent months to change either the mission command and control to make sure that we were set up for success on future operations like this. Like that's the kind of stuff that seems like more educational rather than some of these people just writing books. Um, and again, not trying to besmirch anyone's name, especially the individuals that were, taking part in these operations that didn't make it back. I just think it's a professional culture. Like silence is key when it comes to not oversharing, because again, you don't know who's reading the book. It's just I don't know. It's not one of those things I think needs to be ever shared. Like if someone wants it shared, the military will be like, "Hey, we're giving you the green light. We want to write about this too from a historical vantage point, to educate like a conventional force maybe how to do a raid based off this raid on UBL." But I don't need your personal insight as to how you were walking up the stairs and whispered Osama to get this guy to peek his head around the corner for your Disney movie.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm like a conflict on it because I feel I see where you're coming from in terms of like not oversharing, but at the same time though, like it is like pop culture, and this is how military is able to connect with civilian counterparts that will never really understand the experience. Like this is like Lone Survivor, things like Lone Survivor are like the only way that that Joe Smith on the corner understands some of the challenges that face the military, not only in like going to fight in combat but coming back too. So I feel like there's a part of that aspect too of being able to show kind of the price and the burden that we carry being in the military too. So I think I'm split on it too. There's
And
like
that's true. I mean, you look at like Black Hawk Down, if like I'm saying that Lone Survivor and Killing Osama bin Laden should not have been written, then like I should probably also say that like Black Hawk Down shouldn't have been written. And you know, I also think that people look at a lot of these films. I think the military maybe doesn't care so much anymore because it's a marketing tool
Mm-hmm.
for them, and especially with recruitment. Like how many people saw Lone Survivor, or what was the Chris Kyle one with Bradley Cooper?
American
Uh,
Sniper.
yeah, American Sniper, and they were like, I want to be a Navy SEAL, or you know, like they make all these films like and. Oh, I saw Charlie Sheen play a Navy SEAL. I want to be a Navy SEAL. So like I think there's or the Valor, Act of Valor, another Navy SEAL movie. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
Navy SEAL stuff here. But I don't know. I just if you take like a vow when you get to these organizations not to talk about it, don't talk about it. Like just that, I think that says a lot about you. If regardless of the story that you want to tell, if you're not told immediately after the mission, like, hey guys, you can talk about this. Like, don't talk about it. There's just until it gets declassified. Like, I don't know. It's like it's just like a promise. It's like I've
Mm-hmm.
made like I'm making a promise to you. I'm doing an Iron Man. If I don't do the Iron Man, like that says a lot about my integrity and my character. If the Ranger Regiment says don't talk about this mission, if I talk about this mission, like what do I have at this point then? If you strip from me my integrity, if you strip from me that basic moral foundation there, it's gonna be really hard for me to like actually think that you have any um, intent beyond like a selfish rationale
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
releasing this information.
Yeah, yeah, I see that where you're coming from too. I don't know. It's just like because as much as I roll my eyes when I see another Navy SEAL book, I still think that there are still so many stories in the military, coming from like Rangers or like MARSOC or AFSOC or all these other branches of special operations. So many good stories are out there that people don't know about. Like,
Well, Band of
yeah,
Brothers. I mean that whole thing, it was like the entirety of essentially World War II from D-Day on for the guys out of was it Best not Bastogne? What brigade was it?
it was Bastogne.
Was it?
3-101. Or no, it was 2-101. Was it 2-101?
They called it like whatever after Colonel Sink too. Like they renamed like their regiment and the nickname. But yeah, it's like that kind of stuff. Like I think people will just again, I can see where you'd be conflicted because it's like very cool stories. It motivates people. I loved watching Band of Brothers when
Mm-hmm.
they made an HBO series. Um, I don't know. Maybe wait until the war's over to write books. Like
Maybe just
maybe
like
that's the caveat we have. Like once the war's over, then tell your story, or once you're out of the military, then tell your story. Like don't tell it while you're still in. Don't tell it while the conflict is still ongoing because it's just that the history's not done. I don't
yeah.
know, like Medal of Honor stories. Like everyone knows the Medal of Honor stories because like those are things that people want shared. So like I'm being a hypocrite because Michael Murphy received the Medal of Honor for the actions that Marcus Luttrell was able to document. So I look like a fucking idiot right now. Um, I don't know. I'm conflicted. Okay, like don't talk about it.
I,
Talk
I
about it. Like
yeah. I think
I
that what it
can't.
comes down to, I think what comes down to is just being there's too many Navy SEAL books out there where they guys just try to get their 2 minutes of fame, 5 minutes of fame and fortune for their experiences. But there are so many good. I feel like there's so many good stories out there that people don't know about. Like Chapman, for example. Like Chapman's story, and his Medal of Honor was like huge thing. Like how many stories have you heard about that about guys like Chapman, that were essentially left for dead by NSW. I don't know. It's just like so many cool stories out there that we
Well,
are.
History Channel has a great series right now where it talks about like some great ranger missions that the regiment took on in the last like decade that up until now were only shared like between guys in battalion. Like, oh, did you know a guy on this one? Yeah. I mean, you hear stories about what happened, but like that's the kind of stuff that I think like the military can release what happens on these missions, and then if you want to write about it subsequently, it's like it's already out there.
Mhm.
But I don't know. It's a huge conflict for me. I just don't like. I personally know I would never write a book It's not like I've been a part of things where like I think people would even give a shit what I have to write. That's why I'm on a podcast. But like, I, I took it seriously when they were like, "Don't talk about it." Like, all right,
Yeah. No,
that's
for
like the
sure.
price you get to pay for coming here.
Yeah. It's the price you pay to be part of the club.
Yeah,
What is it? First of all, Fight Club. You don't talk about Fight Club.
yeah. Don't talk about Fight Club.
Yeah. But yeah,
Hashtag Brad Pitt.
that was really random. This is something that I've been thinking about lately. This popped in my head.
Well, I'm gonna get back to studying now because
Yeah.
I don't want to waste this brain matter up here. Oh, these hats too. We'll get those drafted and put on the website for all of you that are looking to get like a cool, sweet post Easter gift.
Yeah. I would say like closing comments, I guess, since I guess we're gonna keep wrapping this up. I don't really have too much to talk about. It's more of the same from my side. You know, functional fitness is still the same programming. Leave a 5-star review. You know, drop a comment down below. Let us know how we're doing. Appreciate all the DMs that we've been getting and all the emails that we've been getting. I guess with the quarantine, you guys have had a lot more time to respond to us, and we have had more time to respond to you. But just to throw it out there, you know, if it takes a couple of days for us to get back to you, it is literally just the two of us answering every question that you guys send in and every DM you send in or every email you send in. It is just the two of us responding to them. So there might be a little bit of delay, just so that if anyone gets a little annoyed that we're not responding or anything.
And then some orders too that have come in. We've got some sock orders and sticker orders that I can't fulfill right now because I don't have any of our inventory on hand because I'm still quarantined. So we either get refunds out to you or contact you as soon as possible just to let you know that in the next couple of weeks we'll be able to fulfill that. But as of right now, I'm running low on personal inventory that I took out here because I didn't plan on being out here for 2 months.
But yeah, I think that we'll wrap up with that for this week. And we will catch you guys next time.
See ya.
Later.
That was